Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits using technology. Normally, when we talk about technology, it's more the digital kind, but today, with a special guest, we're talking about old school manual technology. And the guest today is John Renouard. John, welcome to the show.
Alex, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So, for people hearing you for the very first time, can you give me a brief or give us a brief introduction of who you are and what you do?
You bet. You bet. So, again, my name's John Renouard. Grew up in Southern California in the USA. I now reside in Salt Lake City, Utah. And for the last 13 years, I've been running a nonprofit that I founded in 2010, and it goes by the name of Who Lives. And the Who is an acronym for Water, Health, and Opportunity. And so we've been in that sphere now for again pushing just past 13 years.
And this organization, what is its primary purpose?
So it started out. Its primary purpose was to create clean water, and this originated from a trip that I took. My oldest son was doing some missionary and humanitarian work over in Kenya and Tanzania, and he was there for a couple of years. He came home, and we decided that we wanted to go back with him as a family and just kind of check out the areas that he was working and the stuff that he was doing. So I brought my family over there. We have 6 kids, and I brought my mom as well. And it was just an incredible trip. If you haven't been to Africa, I recommend highly you put it on your bucket list. It really is a magical continent, and the places that we visited were just incredible. But it was during this trip that we kept on seeing this these girls and women who were transporting something in these buckets, and the reality was I felt kind of embarrassed because I just didn't believe, and this was in 2010. It was just hard for me to believe that they were all carrying water. And when I finally we were outside of a hotel right on the sidewalk, and these 6 kids were passing by us, 3 boys and 3 girls, and the boys were messing around, goofing around, pushing each other. But the girls got out of their transport, and they promptly put these buckets on their heads and they started walking. And I was asking my driver, I said, where are they going? And she said, well, they're going to to their school. So, well, what are they carrying on their heads? And he says, well, it's water. And it was just almost too hard to believe, because these were young girls. These were, fourth, fifth grade, girls. So they're what, 9, 10 years old. They're carrying, these huge buckets on their heads, and they're bringing water to a public school in the second largest city in Tanzania. And I'm like, well, don't they have water in those schools? And the guy says, no, there's no running water to the schools, or if there is, it gets shut off quite often. So the girls are required to bring water to the schools. So this was the beginning of me thinking, wow, here we are again in 2010, and our brothers and sisters are still living like this. And so on the plane trip home, I think a lot of people come away from a vacation like this with different emotions. And mine was, I was just incredulous that again in 2010, that these girls were having to wake up 2 to 3 hours earlier than the boys, go fetch the water, come back home, get dressed for school, carry the water to the school just so they had drinking water for the students. And I was pretty angry. And so my first thought was, boy, if we could fix the water problem, then almost by default we can fix half of the healthcare problems. And if we had clean water and they had decent health, then almost by default, again, we would create this opportunities for these girls to go to school without having to fetch the water, opportunity, the waste of time that it takes to gather water could be reutilized. And so that became the acronym: water, health, and opportunity. So that's how we started. That's the acronym for Who Lives, and so we have been again. Our first mission has been water, but as of recently, and we'll talk about this probably a little bit later, the health and opportunity has bled over into rescuing girls who are being severely abused in some societies. Um, and I'm sure we'll get into that here in a little bit.
I've been to Africa and I agree with you. It is a magical place. I haven't seen Kenya or Tanzania myself, but I have been to South Africa and Lesotho,
Yeah,
as well as
yeah.
Mauritius and Morocco. But you're right. There's a certain energy there that is absolutely magnificent. That it's just a raw, primal type of energy. And seeing these kinds of women doing these kinds of chores of carrying the water, I'm sure, I mean, it obviously had a tremendous impact on you. A lot of people might not, might look the other way when they get home. I mean, like they block it out. They say, this, I'm done with that life. I need to move on and live my life here. But it takes a certain individual to say, I need to do something here. I actually need to create, in your case, an organization to help them. What was your initial, I mean, you said your initial thought was to help them with the water. So what was the steps that you took to be able to start figuring out how to solve this problem?
So that's a kind of an interesting scenario as well, in that I had zero experience in the nonprofit world up to this point. After college, I ran a large construction company out of California for 3 or 4 years, and then I ended up moving to Washington State, where I got into residential real estate, and so I didn't have any background to to help me in this endeavor. And so I just started doing it. My, and I attribute a lot of this to my father, which very conservative, fiscal conservative gentleman, and just the idea is that if there's a problem, you just go fix it, right? And whether it's your car, if it breaks down, you don't call a mechanic. You just figure it out, and you fix it. The refrigerator goes bad, and you go and you fix it. And so that was kind of the attitude that I took. I had no experience. I didn't know what to do, but I was going to do something. And so we started, you know, literally I think I just Googled how to start a nonprofit, and went through the steps to register Who Lives and create a board. Um, and maybe this is unusual, maybe it's not, but I really had no idea what I was going to do at this point. I really, I didn't know where this was going to take me, or where we're going to go with it. But every day I would just get up and focus on it, and do what I can. At the end of the day, it was a series of events, and it was about 2.5 months after I registered Who Lives that, quite literally, in the middle of the night, I get this idea for what we now call the village drill. Now, when it comes to you in the middle of the night, and you're fast asleep, it's a little different experience. So it woke me up, and I went out to my dining room table, and there was some scratch paper there, and I kind of drew out what I had kind of seen, and what I had looked at, and I kind of drew it out. And to be quite honest, I wasn't even sure 100% what it was. I mean, again, I grew up in Southern California. My water came out of a tap. I've never had a well. I've never seen a well being drilled before, but I had a very distinct impression that this was going to be a tool that could be utilized to drill water wells. So that was a very unique situation, to say the least. The next day, another very, very unique situation happened, in that I got a call from the university that's right near us, where I went to school, some 20 plus years earlier. And I got a call from the engineering department asking me if I had a project for them to work on. And quite honestly, I thought it was a very unusual question, and I wasn't sure why they were calling me. And and later on, we figured out that he was actually returning a call from about 2.5 months earlier. but hadn't realized it. We had talked about a brick making machine about 2.5 months earlier, but somehow my name and number appeared on his desk on this particular day, and he gave me a call. And it just happened to be the day after I had the idea for what we now call the village drill. And so I told him about this idea of a human powered drill, and the gentleman who called is in charge of what's called the capstone program. Capstone program is where engineering students, and it's for other colleges uses it as well, but here it was particular for the engineering students. And basically all the graduating engineering students would work on we'll call it a real live project throughout the year. So my particular project was one of 31 other projects, and was one of 31 other projects. And again, after some discussion and telling them about this idea for the village drill, at first they weren't so sure, but I presented it to the board, and at the end of the day, they said, "Yeah, okay, we'll give this a shot." And so basically, for the next 7 months, I had six graduating engineering students, to take my concept and engineer it. Let's make this thing a viable tool. And again, there's a lot of inside stories that came about, but at the end of the day, after 7 months, we had finished the design and built this machine that is now in 40 countries around the world. This machine has drilled over, and we have 130 or 140 of the machines out there working, but we finish about 3 or 4 wells a day, every single day, somewhere around the world. We're at about a little bit over 13,000 wells that have been drilled in the last 10 years or so. So it's from starting from zero to where we are at 13 years down the road. It's been a lot of what I would call miracles, and a lot of great things that have happened to bring us to that point. But it started with literally nothing, without me knowing much about anything.
That's just in itself, that's an incredible story. We could just end the episode right here. No, but truly, to go from an idea like that to actual realization, and then, I mean, there's a great number of successes here as well. I'm curious though to know about the drill itself. So you said it's
Yeah.
man powered. It took about 7 months to build. Can you explain to the audience, like, what does this drill kind of look like? How big is it? How fast does it work? How long does it take to drill? Like the operational, how do you? We'll talk about how you get it to the location after. But I'm curious to know,
Yeah.
once it's on site, I assume it arrives in pieces. They have to kind of assemble it. It's a certain size. It takes a certain amount of time to build it. If you can give that kind of visualization, that would be great.
You bet. You bet. So, if I were to explain it visually, I would start with, there's a wheel that, if you've seen the game Wheel of Fortune, it kind of looks like a Wheel of Fortune wheel, and it sits just below chest height, and that's the wheel that the humans will spin. Usually, it has four humans on it, and they spin it in unison. How it is supported, there's going to be some people out there that know what a cherry picker is. Cherry picker is a tool used by mechanics to pull an engine out of a car. So if you can imagine, these feet that go underneath the car, then it has a cantilever, and that kind of goes up, and a chain that goes down, and it will lift the engine out of the car. The body of the village drill resembles that tool, the engine picker, what we again call a cherry picker. And so what happens is again, we got four men that are spinning this wheel, and through the center of the wheel is your traditional drill string. At the bottom of the drill string is a drill bit, and the drill bit is what's cutting the ground. And so operationally, it is almost identical to a big rig truck that's also doing what we call wet slurry drilling. And the only difference is, instead of having hydraulic motors that are turning the drill string, you have four men typically, again, pushing this wheel of fortune, spinning this wheel of fortune, and that's cutting the ground. And a lot of people say, well, how can it spin if it's cutting into the ground? And I and again, when I started this, I knew nothing about drilling, so this was as new to me as it may sound to you. But what we found out was that when you drill, you're actually not typically pushing down on the drill string. You're actually lifting up slightly on the drill string. And because if you were to push down, it would just get clogged into the dirt and get stuck. And I remember thinking that it sounds like the old-fashioned pencil sharpener. So those of you that are old enough where you put the pencil in the pencil sharpener and you turn a crank, and if you can remember, if you pushed hard on that pencil would just get jammed in there, and it wouldn't sharpen your pencil. But if you put the pencil in there and turn the crank, then it would gently pull that pencil in and give you a nice sharp point. And that's kind of the design of the village drill. And that's why when we're spinning it, it actually spins, if you have a very natural stroke, at about 34 RPM, which ironically is about the same speed that the big rigs are actually spinning, is about 34 RPM. So when we're on soft soil, it drills very efficiently and very quickly. The average depth of the aquifers of our 13,000 wells that we have out there is about 42 meters, or in feet, it would be like 125 to 130 feet below the surface is where the aquifers are at. And when we were in just normal soil, just not on hard rock, but just in normal soil, we can actually drill in 8 to 12 hours. We could drill that 128 feet, or the 40 plus meters. So it happens quite rapidly, and it drills quite efficiently. And so that's what has given us a lot of success, and the fact of, well, how is human power even possible? And it's because of the mechanics of drilling. You don't have to have this hard leverage, pushing down. So I don't know if you can visualize that, but if not, go to our website and there'll be plenty of pictures to put that more into focus.
I love the engineering part of it. I mean, my engineering brain is just sparkling right now because it empowers then these villages that have to walk so far for water, and that they're able to get it. I guess there's certain locations where it's best to drill, but it gives them such an to your point, health and opportunity as a benefit. And
Right.
the one thing I noticed or paid attention to when we were having the pre-conversation was that in terms of the finances for this project, I know you have obviously your own finances, but part of it is you you encourage or you allow, or I'm not sure what the right word is, but it's the village themselves that end up paying at least or contribute to the expense of the drill, and then there's
Yeah.
more they can do with that. So if you could explain that part.
Yeah, that was one thing. And actually, I'm going to mention something to your engineering mind, and then I'll answer this other question. But to answer your question on the engineering mind, uh, I'm probably the antithesis of an engineer. My background is in finance. Again, my wife and I owned 9 real estate franchises up in the Northwest here in the United States, and I would have 400 to 600 agents working for me at any given time. So again, engineering was not in my background at all. But what was interesting was when I was working with these engineers, the one thing that I kept having to repeat is to dumb it down, to keep it simple, because I knew intuitively going into these rural African villages that we could not have things that break. And so they wanted to add, clutches and sprockets and gearing and all these different things. And we knew that, everything you add like that is also going to create a failure point. And so that's the one thing we've been very, very proud of, is that these engineers really design something that is bulletproof, our what we call 001, the first drill that we ever introduced into Africa, happened to be in the country of Tanzania. And here we are 13 years later, and that drill is still drilling today. So it's been
Wow.
an amazing feat from that standpoint as well. One thing that, and I think this comes from the fact that I don't come from any sort of a traditional nonprofit background, is that I look at everything from a new set of eyes, from an inexperienced set of eyes. But one thing I noticed, and these were some statistics that came out, was a statistic came out. I think it was by the UN or anyways, several of the very, very large NGOs that are out there. And they talked about the fact that there was 85% of all the wells that had been placed in the African continent were now derelict. And I'm thinking, how is that even possible? And in looking at why pumps were failing, the question actually became, why were they not being fixed? And what became very, very obvious to me is that, and again, we're painting a wide swath here, but in most cultures in the African continent that I've been to, if you don't have ownership of something, you don't touch it. It doesn't belong to you. And so what would happen is a lot of very well-intended NGOs and nonprofits are going into many of these locations, and they're donating these wells, and they put up their plaque, and they even will set up water boards and things of that nature to help them run. But the problem is that as soon as the pump would stop working, they would abandon the well and wait for that NGO to come back and fix it, which rarely happened. And so it became obvious to me from the very, very beginning that ownership had to play an absolute key role in developing this process of bringing clean water to the masses. And I truly believe that when you donate things for free, you're actually creating more dependency. You're telling them, you're not good enough to do this on your own, so I have to go in and be your hero, and I'm going to go in and do this for you. And it creates this powerlessness about them. And if you can imagine, just the opposite occurs when they have ownership, when it's theirs. And when it's theirs, and we go in and we teach them literally how to make money with that well. And I kind of coined a saying that if a well is making money, the day it breaks is the day it gets fixed. And that is, again, contingent upon if they have ownership of the apparatus. So that's something that's been very, very important to us. And we have proven this, I mean, just hundreds and hundreds of times, that villages that own their well, that own their pump, if it goes bad, and normally wells, just to give you a sense of why they go bad. Most hand pumps. Now we work in rural areas where there's very little electricity, so almost all the pumps are hand pumps, and at the bottom of the pump you have these rubber seals. And when you first develop a well, because there's going to be a lot of sand and cuttings from developing the well, there's that little bit of sand and cuttings are going to work their way up, and they're going to cause the seals in the pumps to fail. And depending on a lot of different circumstances, those seals will last typically from 10 months to maybe 2 years, but eventually they're going to go out. Now, the second set of seals that you put on, these rubber seals that you put on, those can last 5 plus years. The third set will almost last a lifetime because again, all the sediment is out. It's just water that's being pumped through there, and they last a long time. But in those first couple of years, if the pump fails, again, they just abandon it. Not, I don't know if they realize or don't realize, or if it's just so cultural, but to replace those seals, the seals only cost $3 or $4. They're just rubber seals, $3 or $4. It only takes maybe 1 to 2 hours tops to pull out the old pump and pipe and replace the seals. So it's not an arduous task to replace them. But again, culturally, if they don't own it, they won't do it. And if they do own it, they will do it. I mean, it's just black and white. And so we realized very, very early on that our goal was to do everything we can to enhance. We never wanted them to feel a sense of inferiority. Just the opposite. We wanted to be there to lend a hand, to give some guidance, but this is their project, their deal, and the success we've had with this model has been phenomenal.
And just to underline that point of ownership, so do they own the drill? Do they own the pump? Do they own the pieces? Like what parts do they own? And the second part two question is you said they can make money from it. How exactly do they make money? How does a village make money from having this well or this pump?
Great, great, great question. So now we got to separate it into two parts. So one, we'll talk about the drill. Now the drill is typically owned by a drilling team. So these are 5 or 6 individuals, typically men, but one of our most successful groups is a company out of Rwanda, run by a beautiful uh, young woman. Her company is called WAR. I think it stands for Water Africa Rwanda. And Christelle is one of the champions of the drilling industry, and utilizes the village drill among other things. But it's women owned and women run. But typically it is men. And and so you have a drill team, and because the drill is human powered, and it like you said, it disassembles, so you can put it in the back of a pickup truck, literally drive it anywhere you want to go. And then because most people live off of improved roads, you can now pick it up and walk it into where the people are living, the villages they're living, even if it's on a walking path and not on a main road. Matter of fact, we were in the Congo, and we actually disassembled the village drill, put it in a canoe, and paddled it up the Congo River for 3 days to arrive at a location there to bring them clean water. That drill, and they've actually purchased another one since then. I think they've drilled 40 or 50, maybe even 60 wells in this community that's only accessible, by boat, or in our case, canoe. And so that's the real one of the real geniuses is that one thing that we learned early on was even if you had all the money in the world, if you only had these big trucks, because 70% of the population in rural Africa live off of improved roads, these big trucks can never even get to 70% of the population. And so again, that's where the village drill has fit itself into a niche to actually get to the people where they live. And again, it is small enough to be hand carried, but yet strong enough to drill down, not to what we call groundwater, but through the bedrock into the aquifers. So those wells rarely do they run dry. And so those drill teams, they're trained by us, but they are independent drill teams. That means that any profit that they make is theirs. We don't take anything back from them on a like per well basis. It's their business. They're in charge, but they can offer these wells at maybe almost 10% of what a well drilled by a big truck might cost. So On average, the retail cost of one of these wells drilled by the village drill is, somewhere on the low side, maybe 2,800, on the high side, about 5,000. So that's the, depending on the area and the type of soil and different things, that's what these drill teams are going to charge the villages. And they're going to make a living by drilling these wells. So that's the drill, and that drill can drill again. It can drill, a well once a week. We have several drills that are drilling 40 plus wells per year, and so again, that drill can drill over and over again. Once the drill drills the hole, then you actually remove the drill and it can move to another location. And then you develop that hole into what we call a well by adding up, basically by adding a pump to it. And depending on where you live, you can put any type of pump down that hole. If you want a solar pump, if you want an electric pump because you have electricity nearby, you can do that, or you can put a hand pump. So the hole will take whatever kind of pump that you have um, to bring the water to the surface. And so now that the village has paid, two, three, $4,000 for that well belongs to them. They have ownership of that well. How they make money, and it's two ways. One is you will physically make money because just by adding 10% more water to a crop, many crops will yield nearly 50% more product. Um, Tomatoes, I know if you add, 10, 15% more water to a tomato plant, that it's going to produce 20 or 30% more fruit. Other plants, lettuce and stuff, even have a higher yield to water ratio. So you make money by irrigation. You also make money things like eggs. Chickens who drink clean water will typically lay 6 and 7 eggs a week. Chickens who drink dirty water might lay 3, maybe 4 eggs per week. Goats will in many cases going from drinking dirty water to clean water will have an additional gestation period during the year. When you make bricks, it's kind of funny. You make bricks out of mud, right? But you need clean water to make strong bricks. If you use dirty water to make bricks, your bricks will crumble. Something I didn't know. So if you're in the brick making business, having clean water will increase the quality of your bricks, quite a bit, and now you can fetch a higher price. So that's one side, is that you make money. The other side is that you're going to save money. Um, because you're not going to an open water source where there are mosquitoes and other dangers. You're not going to have the medical bills of again of buying the malaria medicine, or if you twist an ankle, you get bit by an animal. All these things happen as these women are fetching this water, where you're going to eliminate those costs, and so you're going to save money. One of the heart wrenching uh, programs, I don't know what to call it, traditions maybe, is that when you have a death in the family, that family typically will hold some sort of a remembrance for that person who passed away. But it's particularly sad when it happens to a child, because sometimes those funerals will cost 1 to 2 years worth of salary in order to bury their child. And so if you don't have to bury that, those children because they have clean water, again, those are funds that you don't have to expend. And so it kind of works both ways. And there's many more examples of how it works both ways, but that's how a community, when they have ownership and they have full availability to the water, as opposed to, there's a lot of, there's, and this is the debate that I've always kind of fought against, is these pay per use locations. And I'm not a big proponent of pay per use, because again, even if it's a nickel to go fill up a 20 20-liter jerry can. If I can go to a river and get it for free and save that nickel, a lot of times they will do that. And maybe they only buy fresh, the clean water for maybe drinking or cooking. But the problem with it is that the bucket that they use to collect water for, let's say, irrigation, is now contaminated. And so you lose that benefit of having clean buckets if you have cross contamination. So there's a lot of reasons that full ownership, where they own the water, they can go there as many times as they want throughout the day. There's no limitations. That's where you really see the benefit to the community really surface.
That is a tremendous amount of positive impact. And
Yeah.
thank you for the specific numbers too. I was wondering if you could share a success story that is more emotional as opposed to factual, because we talked about, how many machines, how many countries, how many wells, some of the improvements to the crops and saving money because of medical bills. But is there like a story that you could share about any particular village that you just saw maybe a better mood, or, more optimism, more future looking versus, our immediate needs have been now met. And now we can look as a community to improve our lifestyle as a result.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories, but the one that comes immediately to mind is about 3 times a year, we'll actually bring down people to Africa for this very, very unique experience of going to these rural villages and really getting to know the people. And we had a group that was with us, and it was just a humble family, and I made the decision to go and visit a school that received a well about, I think it was just 4 months, 5 months earlier. And we were going to show up unannounced because we wanted, a lot of times when you announce that you're going to be there, they go through this whole thing about, they want to, line everybody up and sing to you and really entertain you. And my philosophy is we want to interact with them. We don't want to be the stars of the show. We want, we love this interaction. And so we actually traveled. It was in Kenya. We were in Mombasa, so we're driving down the coast. And to be honest with you, if had I known how far it was and how rough the road was, we probably wouldn't have made the trip. But on the map, it only looked about like an inch and a half, and so I figured, okay, we can make that trip. Well, it ended up being about a 4.5 hour ride on a washboard road, and it was hot and dusty. But at the end of the day, we were almost, we were just a couple miles from Tanzania. We went to this all girls school that again had a couple projects that put together, and they paid for their well. We subsidized in certain situations. We will definitely subsidize the well when it makes sense. But as far as they knew, they were paying full price for this well. And we get there, and it was one of the most emotional situations because they start showing us what they have done with this water in 4 months. Well, the first thing that they show us are their showers. These girls had never taken a shower before, and now they can shower, and that was so impressive. I never even seen that before. At a school of this size is probably, uh, I'm going to apologize if I get this number wrong, but I'm pretty sure there was at least 800 girls in this all girls school. And then they take us to the backside of the school. They have planted 10 acres of vegetables, everything, onion, cucumber, you name it. They had corn, maize. They had just an incredible, strawberries, these incredible crops, and they were all like getting ready to harvest, and we were just in tears. I mean, I've been doing this long enough to where I've seen a lot of things, and a lot of things don't move me because I've seen it so many times. But this just moved me to tears to see what these women, these girls, had done, and the pride that they had. So they were not only feeding themselves, but with the extra vegetables, and then selling it to the community, and also the extra water they were selling to the community. So this school went from being one of the poorest schools in the region to being one of the wealthiest. And I'll follow up on that. It was a year later that their scores had put them like in the top 3 or 5% in the country, where they were, down in in the bottom 30% or lower prior to them getting this water. So it was definitely an emotional day to see the transformation that the school made and these girls made. There's a little quote that we caught, and she says something as simple as, "Oh yeah, it's so much better to have water," and she says it with her beautiful accent, and it's just been one of my favorite sayings since then. It's like, "Oh yeah, it's much better to have water." So that was probably, to see what this drill materialized and to see what it did. That was a huge thing for me. And part of it, and I don't think about this often, but part of this is I gave up my career. I've been self-employed. I've owned mortgage companies and title companies and many real estate companies. I kind of gave all that up to do this, and I say that it never felt like a sacrifice. It just felt like what I should do. So I just kind of did it. So I don't want to, but it was interesting that, during the prime of my earning years to do this. But when you have a situation like that, there's really no amount of, business accolades that I could have received that would have been greater than that moment of seeing that school completely transformed, and knowing that you had played a little part in making that happen. And throughout the hard times, and anybody that has run a nonprofit knows how hard this business is. It does have payoffs, and you do have your good days, but it's hard work. I always say that, had I worked this hard in my real estate career, I'm sure I would have had, many houses probably in many states. But again, my family life is important. But this, and again, maybe if we have a little bit more time, a little bit later, I can tell you about one more experience that we had that led to, again, a group of girls. It was a rescue center, and then we realized that this rescue center was rescuing girls from what is referred to as FGM, or female genital mutilation. And our involvement in rescuing those girls and playing a huge part in hopefully soon eliminating that practice from Kenya, and then hopefully eventually, throughout the world.
These are incredibly moving stories, and I can imagine, I can almost picture a woman like that saying, it's good to have water.
Yeah.
Um, and, I would say that wealth is not only defined by financial wealth. Um, it's wealth. It could be about people, the connections you have. Um, and there are a lot of studies about this, about how, what really makes people happy. And it's not the size of their bank accounts or the number
Yeah.
of cars or houses they have. So what you've done here is incredible. And it's had such an impact on so many people. That is an incredible amount of wealth, in my mind, at least.
I wholeheartedly agree. There's zero regret for putting my financial, well-being, ahead of this project that we're doing. And a lot of that credit, I'm just going to throw this in here. It comes from a supportive spouse. My wife, even when we were doing very, very well financially, my wife has always been very conservative, and we virtually had no debt other than our home. And she was the type of gal who would use coupons for everything. She would buy $300 worth of groceries for $34, and and I never really kind of that as we were, you know going through the years prior to starting our nonprofit. I never imagined that those disciplines would enable us to do what we're now doing. Because, quite frankly, if my wife was a spender, if she didn't care, if she was, constantly buying expensive clothes or demanding expensive cars or vacations. There's no way we could have done this. But because of her natural frugality, we were able to, to make this happen. So a lot of credit goes to, in my case, my spouse, who not only supported me, but was in the habit of living frugally. So when the funds weren't there, I say we hardly noticed. She has a different take. She noticed she had to make all the bills balance, but our lifestyle didn't change all that much. It changed some, but not as much as one might expect.
Shifting focus to the future, I'm curious to know what are the plans in the short term? I mean, I imagine there's more drills, more countries, but is there anything beyond that that you would like to accomplish with this organization?
Yeah, and I think I've made mention a couple times, but um, we stumbled upon, we were actually putting a well in a what was called a rescue center, and to be honest with you, I had no idea what the rescue center was for. I didn't know if it was for animals or people, but we put the well in there, and I started asking some more questions, and we found out that this rescue center was housing girls who were trying to escape this tradition of being cut and then sold as a child bride. And when I started looking into what was really happening and really doing a deep dive, it's I almost had the same visceral reaction as I did with the water, and says we cannot live with this. And so I personally have put a lot of my time and effort into stopping this practice. And the practice again is twofold. One, when a girl becomes what they call of age, which is typically when they start getting their period. So typically this is age 8 to 14. Um, they're going to go and they're going to, kidnap this girl in the middle of the night. They're going to take her and they're going to literally cut off her female genitals as part of this practice. And then they do that in preparation of selling these girls, calling them child brides, but it's not, it's just slavery, because they're selling them to a 60, 70-year-old man as wife number 5 or 13 or 17. And now these girls become the property of these men. During the day, it's just labor. They're the ones that are fetching water. They're the ones that are cleaning and cooking and doing all these other chores. And then, obviously, at night they become the property of these men again. And we, as an organization, just said, now that I know about this, what can be done? And so we took kind of the same approach, and we went right to the source, and like one of the first places we went to was the police, and said, we know this practice is illegal. What can we do to help you enforce it? So instead of blaming them or making a ruckus, we went to them and says, what can we do to make your job easier? And first they were flabbergasted because no one ever asked them before. They just used them as, as scapegoats. And they said, one of our biggest problems is we have limited amount of fuel that we're allowed to use, and basically most of these precincts had around 5 cars, but their fuel allotment allowed them only to go about 30 miles a day, which means you can drive out 15 miles and drive back 15 miles. But a lot of these atrocities were happening 30 and 40 miles away. So if they were to drive 80 miles, they would literally have to park that car for the next 3, 4, 5 days before their allotment would come up. So we entered into an agreement with them that we would pay for their fuel if they were going on an FGM, or a gender biased victim type call. And all they had to do was show their report that they, because they have to do, their police report on every call, show the report either to the magistrate or what we would call CPS. So, so the organization that's watching out for these girls. And as long as those things matched, we would continue to pay for their fuel. Well, this enabled them to go to where these crimes were happening. And so the first time in forever, they started making arrests. and and during this cutting season, because they actually have seasons in which they do this. Typically, it's twice a year. The longer season is from late November to early January, the one we just came through. During that season, we made over 60 arrests. There's been over 20 convictions, 100% conviction rate. Others are still waiting for their day in court, and we have put a big dent in what they're doing. We're going the next step now to where these victims of these crimes can then sue the perpetrators um, for what we hope will be their land, because that's about the only thing that these perpetrators are afraid of losing. They'll even go to jail, but they don't want to lose their land. So we're working with the law students and working with legislation in hopes that we'll be able to bring lawsuits against these perpetrators. And once we do that, once we're able to grab the land of these perpetrators, this practice is going to stop. And so we're working on that, and that's our next um, the project that we're also doing as we continue to do the water and other projects. This is another area, and certainly comes under the category of you got health and opportunity, right? If we can stop this practice, obviously that's a health issue that we're going to solve, and then this opportunity, for these girls to get an education and not become a child slave at age 12 is going to create opportunity. So it's certainly within our mandate, but it's an area that we're very, very focused in right now. We actually have a capital fundraising program right now. We're trying to raise capital to rebuild the child's courthouse so that when these children go and testify, sometimes against their parents or the village elders, they can do it in a safe place and do the testifying via what they call like shortwave video, and not be in the same room as they are right now, to give them the confidence to testify against these crimes. So that's kind of what we're doing right now. We're trying to raise about $50,000 to rebuild this courthouse, and then also pay for the transportation and the housing of these girls in order to go and testify.
Absolutely amazing. I just want to thank you for everything that you've done and everything that you're doing. It's absolutely inspiring and amazing and very touching.
Well, thanks, Alex. Appreciate those kind words.
Unfortunately, I want to respect your time as well. So I think the best part or the next thing to ask would be is how can people get in touch with you? How can they contribute or donate or be a part of what you do or ask follow-up questions if they have any?
Yeah, thank you. So we're very, very open. We have incredible transparency. We have the highest rankings on every watchdog program that's out there. But you just Google wholives.org and our information is there. My email is simply my first name, John, at wholives.org. And again, we'll be able to answer any subsequent questions that anybody has. On the website, you can do a donation, and all on the website as well, it tells you different methods. If you want to go on one of the trips that we take, the trips are fantastic. We have a different attitude. We do not go over there to teach them. We go over there to learn. We go over there to learn what does it take to live with so wholeheartedly without the material things. And by doing that, somehow when you return home and your battery in your cell phone goes dead, it's not this tragic, life-ending experience. You're able to put things into perspective, and everybody that goes on these trips just come back just changed. We've had children who have lost friends to suicide and were depressed themselves, go on these trips and come back completely changed. And so those are some of the exciting things that can be done as well. So yeah, please, if this touches you in any way, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to chat with you. We're small in numbers of employees, but we're huge on impact. And so again, we'd love to talk to you and get you involved.
John, thank you so much for joining me today.
Alex, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, and thank you for what you do to bring the word out to people. I really appreciate your past people you brought on. This is a great site, and people need to subscribe and become an active participant of your show here. It's been great.
Thank you. All right, that's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again in the next Agents of Nonprofit.